Hey there, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be diving into the chapter on human reproduction. Basically, we're breaking down the whole fascinating step-by-step biological journey of exactly how human life begins. My goal here is to take all that complex textbook anatomy and, translate it into a clear, connected, and super visual story. So, let's jump right in.
Okay, I want to start with this mind-blowing statistic because it really sets the stage for the epic scale of the microscopic race we're talking about today. A human male ejaculates anywhere from 200 to 300 million sperms during coitus. Hundreds of millions. But, and this is the crazy part, it literally only takes one single sperm to successfully fertilize an ovum and kickstart a human life. Just one.
So, here's our quick roadmap for today. We're going to start with male anatomy and sperm production, then move over to female anatomy and egg production. After that, we'll cover the menstrual cycle, fertilization and sex determination, and wrap things up with implantation.
All right, part 1, male anatomy and sperm production. Let's establish how the male reproductive system works, because it basically operates as this highly specialized, non-stop production facility.
Looking at the pelvis region here, the primary sex organs, the testes, are actually situated outside the main abdominal cavity in a pouch called the scrotum. And there's a really brilliant physiological reason for this setup. The scrotum keeps the testes about 2 to 2.5 degrees Celsius cooler than your normal internal body temperature. That cooler environment, it's absolutely crucial for manufacturing sperm. Once they're produced, the sperms travel through this whole complex series of ducts, starting from the rete testes to the vasa efferentia, into the epididymis, and then all the way up through the vas deferens before finally being transported out through the urethra.
Let's zoom in on that actual manufacturing process, which is called spermatogenesis. Think of it like a continuous, microscopic assembly line that kicks into gear at puberty. It's driven by a surge in hormones from the brain, specifically gonadotrophin-releasing hormone, which gets luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone going. The assembly line starts with these diploid cells called spermatic gonia multiplying on the inside wall of the seminiferous tubules. Some of those develop into primary spermatocytes, which then go through meiosis, that's a reduction division, to form haploid secondary spermatocytes. Those divide again, giving us 4 equal haploid spermatids. And finally, through a transformation called spermiogenesis, those spermatids become fully formed spermatozoa, or, as we know them, sperms.
Now, the design of the sperm itself is just brilliant. It's basically a microscopic delivery vehicle. Up at the front, the head holds all the genetic material, capped off by this structure called the acrosome. That cap is packed with enzymes that are literally designed to break through the female egg. Right behind that is the middle piece, which is just loaded with mitochondria. That is the power plant. It produces the massive amount of energy the tail needs to whip back and forth, giving the sperm the vigorous motility it needs to swim all the way to the ovum.
Okay, Section 2, Female Anatomy and Egg Production. As we're going to see, the female system is structurally and functionally integrated to do a whole lot more. It's not just about creating gametes, it has to handle the incredibly demanding job of nurturing a developing baby.
Walking through this setup, the primary sex organs are the 2 ovaries located in the lower abdomen, and their job is to produce the female gamete, the ovum. When an ovum is released, it gets swept up by these little finger-like projections called fimbria into the funnel-shaped infundibulum of the fallopian tube. From there, it travels into a wider section called the ampulla. Now, this whole duct system leads straight down into the uterus or the womb. It's this muscular, inverted, pear-shaped organ lined with a rich, glandular inner layer called the endometrium, which is specifically built to host a pregnancy. And then the uterus opens into the vagina through a narrow passage called the cervix.
Here is where we see a massive biological difference between the two systems. While male sperm production, spermatogenesis, is this continuous thing from puberty well into old age, female egg production, oogenesis, is on a completely different timeline. Listen to this. A couple of million gamete mother cells, or oogonia, are actually formed within the female's ovaries while she is still developing as a fetus. Yeah, you heard that right. No more added after birth. These cells start to divide but hit a temporary pause at a stage called primary oocytes. It's not until puberty that the process unpauses, and only a fraction of those surviving follicles ever mature enough to release an ovum.
Moving on to Section 3, the menstrual cycle. Now that we've met the key anatomical players and know how the gametes form, let's talk about timing. Specifically, this crucial roughly 28 to 29-day cycle of preparation.
Okay, I know. There's a ton of data here. We've got pituitary hormones, ovarian hormones, follicular development, the uterine lining. It's a lot. But I just want you to focus your eyes right in the middle of the cycle, around day 14. Do you see that sharp blue spike? That is a massive surge in luteinizing hormone, or LH. And that LH surge is the exact trigger that forces the mature graphene follicle to rupture and release the ovum. That pivotal moment right there is ovulation.
Let's simplify things a bit and break that cycle down into 4 distinct phases. First up is the menstrual phase, which lasts about 3 to 5 days. This is where the unneeded endometrial lining of the uterus breaks down and is shed. Next is the follicular phase. Ovarian follicles grow, estrogen levels rise, and the endometrium starts to rebuild itself. Then we hit that brief ovulatory phase right in the middle, where the ovum actually gets released. And finally, the luteal phase. This is where the leftover parts of that ruptured follicle transform into the corpus luteum, which starts pumping out massive amounts of progesterone. And that progesterone, it's absolutely essential for maintaining that newly thickened endometrial lining, just in case that released egg happens to get fertilized.
Which brings us to Section 4, Fertilization and Sex Determination. This is kind of the main event of our explainer. We're finally bringing the male and female gametes together. But for fertilization to actually happen, the swimming sperm and the released ovum have to arrive at the exact same time in a very specific spot, the ampullary region of the fallopian tube.
So, when a sperm successfully reaches the ovum, it bumps into its outer layer, called the zona pellucida. Remember that acrosome cap on the sperm? It releases its enzymes to literally drill through this layer. And then, in this incredible defensive maneuver, the very second that first sperm enters, it triggers instant changes in the membrane that completely lock out any other sperms from entering. No way in. Then, the haploid nucleus of the sperm fuses with the haploid nucleus of the ovum, and boom, they form a single diploid cell called a zygote.
Now, this brings up a really fascinating question that I want to throw your way. At the exact moment this zygote is formed, the sex of the future baby is already locked in. But biologically speaking, who actually determines that sex? Is it the mother or the father? Let's take a look at the science.
Okay, so human females have an XX sex chromosome pattern. That means every single haploid ovum they produce is always going to carry an X chromosome. Males, on the other hand, have an XY pattern. Because of that, during sperm production, exactly 50% of the sperms carry an X chromosome and the other 50% carry a Y chromosome. So the bottom line here is that it entirely depends on which sperm wins the race. If an X-carrying sperm fertilizes the ovum, you get XX, a female. If a Y-carrying sperm gets there first, you get XY, a male. So scientifically speaking, it's the father's genetics that determine the sex of the baby.
All right, our final section, number 5, implantation and early development. Let's see what happens to this newly formed zygote as it makes its way down from the fallopian tube into the uterus to survive. As the zygote travels down the isthmus of the oviduct, it doesn't just sit there, it starts dividing immediately. This rapid mitotic division is called cleavage. So one cell becomes 2, then 4, 8, and then 16 daughter cells, which we call blastomeres. As it pushes further into the uterus, it transforms again into this hollow structure called a blastocyst. This blastocyst has an outer layer of cells called the trophoblast and an inner cell mass. The trophoblast layer then literally attaches itself to that thick, prepared endometrium we talked about earlier. The uterine cells rapidly divide to cover the blastocyst, embedding it deep inside the uterine wall. This monumental event is called implantation, and it officially marks the start of pregnancy. Wow, we've really covered an incredible journey today. From the constant manufacturing of millions of sperms to the cyclical release of just one egg, the microscopic race down the fallopian tube, and finally, the zygote dividing and embedding itself securely into the womb. But it does leave us with one massive, thought-provoking question, right? How does this tiny embedded cluster of cells communicate with the mother's body to transform into a fully formed human baby over the next 9 months? Well, that incredible story of embryonic development is going to be the topic for our next explainer. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.